I grew up knowing, without anyone ever saying it out loud, that I was never the favorite. My parents didn't mistreat me openly, but love in our house was measured in attention, and most of it flowed effortlessly toward my younger brother, Daniel. He was the miracle child, the one whose mistakes were forgiven before he apologized, whose dreams were protected even when they were unrealistic. I was the responsible one, the quiet achiever, the fixer, the one expected to understand when things weren't fair. Still, I loved him. Not the kind of love that keeps score, but the kind that remembers holding a baby bottle at 3 in the morning while my parents slept, the kind that stays up late helping with homework, the kind that celebrates another person's happiness even when your own heart feels empty. Daniel was my brother, and no amount of favoritism could change that. Life forced me to grow up early. I worked while studying, saved when others spent, and learned to rely on myself because no one else would. There were nights I cried in silence, questioning why I was always strong for everyone else but never allowed to be weak. Yet those struggles built something powerful inside me: discipline, independence, and eventually, success. By the time Daniel announced his engagement, I was in a position I once thought impossible. Years of relentless work had paid off. I owned businesses, investments, and something far more valuable: freedom. When my parents sat me down and spoke anxiously about wedding expenses, housing concerns, and how hard things are these days, I already knew what I wanted to do. I didn't do it for praise. I didn't do it to prove anything. I did it because I remembered what it felt like to have no safety net. 3 months before the wedding, I surprised Daniel with the deed to a house worth $770,000, fully paid. No loans, no stress, a place where he could start his married life without fear. I'll never forget his expression: shock, disbelief, then tears. He hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe, whispering, "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," I told him. "Just be happy." My parents cried too. They told relatives, neighbors, and anyone who would listen what a generous child they had raised. For once, I felt seen. For once, it felt like I had finally earned my place in the family, not through obedience or sacrifice, but through love. Yet beneath the smiles, something felt off. My mother's gratitude came wrapped in entitlement. My father spoke less to me afterward, as if my success made him uncomfortable. Conversations shifted. Decisions were made without me. Small things, glances exchanged when I entered a room, hushed conversations that stopped abruptly, started adding weight to my chest. I ignored it. I told myself I was being sensitive. I told myself weddings were stressful, that emotions ran high. I focused on the joy of giving, on imagining Daniel unlocking his front door for the first time with his wife by his side. I even turned down business trips so I could be available for wedding errands, fittings, and last-minute needs. I never imagined that my greatest act of love would quietly plant the seed of my deepest betrayal. Because while I was dreaming of family photos and shared laughter, while I was planning a heartfelt speech I hoped to give at the reception, my parents were planning something else entirely, something that would shatter my faith in them and change the meaning of family forever, and I didn't see it coming at all. The first time I sensed something was wrong, it was subtle. I called my mother to ask about the final wedding schedule, excited to hear about the decorations and seating arrangements. There was a pause on the other end of the line, just a second too long. Then she cleared her throat and said, "We've already taken care of everything." Her voice sounded tight, rehearsed, like she was reading from a script she didn't want to forget. I brushed it off. Weddings make people strange, I told myself. A week later, I drove to my parents' house with a folder of documents. Daniel had asked me to keep safe warranties for the house, insurance details, utility transfers. I walked in unannounced, as I always had. The living room fell silent. My father stared at the television without seeing it. My mother folded and unfolded the edge of her scarf, and Daniel wouldn't look at me at all. That was when my stomach tightened. "Is everything okay?" I asked, forcing a smile. My mother stood up abruptly. "Sit," she said. Her tone wasn't loving. It was authoritative, final. I sat. She didn't ease into it. No soft words, no gratitude, just a sentence that cracked my heart in half. "We think it's better if you don't attend the wedding." For a moment, I genuinely thought I'd misheard her. "What?" I laughed nervously. "Mom, what are you talking about?" My father finally spoke, his eyes still fixed on the screen. "It will be complicated. People will talk." "About what?" My voice shook now. "I'm his sister." My mother avoided my gaze. "Your presence makes others uncomfortable. It changes the balance, as if love were a threat." I turned to Daniel, desperate for him to say something, anything. "Daniel," I whispered, "is this what you want?" He swallowed hard, staring at his hands. "It's just things are sensitive right now. After the house, people see you differently. My in-laws, they feel small." I felt the air leave my lungs. "So I'm being punished for helping you. No one is punishing you." My mother snapped. "You should understand, you're mature." There it was. The same word they had used my whole life to excuse my pain. I stood up, my legs trembling. "I gave you everything I could. I gave him a home. I stood by all of you when no one stood by me." My father finally turned toward me, his expression cold. "We didn't ask you to do that." That sentence hurt more than the rejection itself. I realized then that my generosity had crossed an invisible line. I had outgrown the role they assigned me, the quiet supporter, the background character. My success embarrassed them. My presence reminded them of what they couldn't control. I left without another word. In my car, I screamed until my throat burned. Years of swallowed hurt poured out in one unstoppable wave. I remembered birthdays where my achievements went unnoticed, holidays where my sacrifices were expected, moments where love was conditional on my silence. That night, I cried, not because I wasn't invited to a wedding, but because I finally understood the truth. In my family, love was acceptable only when it came without power, and I had unknowingly become too powerful to keep. The days after that conversation passed in a strange, hollow quiet. No calls, no messages. It was as if I had been erased overnight. For the first time in my life, I didn't chase after their approval. I didn't explain myself. I didn't apologize for existing. I simply went silent. At first, the silence felt like punishment. I would reach for my phone out of habit, my fingers hovering over my mother's name, then stopping. I had spent my entire life being the bridge in this family. The one who smoothed conflicts, paid bills, showed up no matter how invisible I felt. Stepping away felt unnatural, like holding my breath underwater. But with each quiet day, something unexpected happened. I began to breathe. Without the constant emotional noise, memories surfaced more clearly. I remembered how I had signed the house papers carefully, how my lawyer had insisted on certain clauses just in case. At the time, I had laughed, telling him this was family. He had only smiled politely and said, "Family doesn't replace foresight." Those words echoed now. I hadn't gifted recklessly. I had protected myself instinctively, perhaps because some part of me had always known that love without boundaries becomes self-destruction. The house was in Daniel's name, but with conditions that acknowledged my investment, my right, my existence. I didn't act immediately. Revenge born of rage is loud and messy. And I was done being loud for people who refused to listen. Instead, I focused on myself. I returned to my work, throwing my energy into projects I had neglected. I traveled, I slept, I healed. Meanwhile, cracks began forming on their side. Daniel called once, then twice. I didn't answer. My parents sent stiff messages, pretending nothing had happened, asking for help with wedding vendors, legal paperwork, just quick advice. I read them without responding. For the first time, my availability was no longer guaranteed. Silence has a way of revealing truth. Without my constant support, reality crept in. Bills piled up. Decisions became stressful. My parents, who had always relied on my competence, suddenly felt the weight of it. Daniel's excitement faded into anxiety as wedding expenses and marital expectations collided. And then there was the house. Questions arose about ownership, taxes, maintenance responsibilities. things they had assumed would just work out because I always handled them. They reached out again, this time with urgency, with politeness that felt unfamiliar. I finally replied with a single sentence, "We can discuss everything after the wedding." That message changed the tone instantly. For the first time, I sensed fear, not of losing me emotionally, but of losing control. They had believed love meant access. They had believed I would always give, even when discarded. They were wrong. In that quiet space I had created, I found something precious: clarity. I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Anger keeps you tied to the people who hurt you. What I felt now was resolve. I didn't want to hurt them the way they had hurt me. I wanted something far more powerful. I wanted respect, and respect doesn't come from pleading. It comes from boundaries, from consequences, from knowing when to step back and let others face the results of their choices. As the wedding day approached, I wasn't counting days in sadness. I was preparing for truth, for closure, and for a moment that would redefine every relationship in my life. Quietly, calmly, on my own terms, the wedding day arrived without fanfare in my world. No invitations sat on my table, no outfit hung waiting by the door. Instead, the morning felt calm, unnervingly calm. I made coffee, watched sunlight spill across the floor, and realized something that surprised me. I wasn't sad. While my family gathered for photographs and rehearsed smiles, I sat with my lawyer in a quiet office, reviewing documents I had signed months ago without fully understanding how important they would become: the house, the conditions, the protections everyone had ignored because they assumed my kindness meant weakness. It didn't. The house had been a gift, yes, but not an unconditional surrender. It was placed under a trust, with clauses requiring respect, acknowledgement, and continued communication regarding major decisions. Clauses that ensured I could not be erased after being used. Clauses my parents had never bothered to read. By noon, the phone started ringing. I didn't answer. By evening, messages flooded in, confused, panicked, desperate. Daniel finally called from a private room at the venue, his voice trembling. "There's a problem," he said. "They're saying the house paperwork isn't final. The bank flagged something." I closed my eyes, steady and composed. "I know." "What do you mean you know?" he asked. "Why didn't you tell us?" I answered honestly. "You didn't ask, and you made it clear I wasn't welcome to be part of your life anymore." Silence filled the line. I didn't take the house away. That would have been cruel. Instead, I paused the final transfer temporarily. Enough to force a conversation they had tried to avoid. Enough to remind them that love doesn't mean invisibility. My parents called next. Gone were the cold tones, the authority. In their place, pleading, regret, justifications wrapped in excuses. "You embarrassed us," my mother cried. "You disrespected me first." I replied quietly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply stated facts. I explained how deeply their rejection had wounded me, how being excluded after everything I gave had shattered something I might never fully rebuild. For the first time in my life, they listened. Daniel apologized through tears, not a shallow apology, but one heavy with realization. He admitted his silence had been cowardice. He admitted he had chosen comfort over loyalty. I told him the truth I had carried for years. I never needed gratitude. I needed respect. After the wedding, I completed the transfer, with new boundaries in place, clear ones, written ones, emotional ones. I stepped back from being the family's solution to every problem. I stopped overgiving. I stopped shrinking myself. The revenge wasn't in taking something away. It was in reclaiming myself. Months later, life felt lighter. I had peace. Distance taught my family what my presence never could. They began to treat me differently, not because they suddenly became better people, but because they finally understood my value. And if they didn't, that was okay too. I learned the most powerful lesson of all: being kind does not require being sacrificed. Love does not mean accepting betrayal, and walking away calmly with dignity is sometimes the sweetest victory of all. I didn't attend the wedding, but I finally showed up for myself.